What am I doing with my life? What is happening? Why am I doing what I'm doing now? What do I want to do next? What do I really want? Who am I really? What is really important for me? These questions haunted me between 40 and 45, and I didn't have answers. All I had was questions, and I thought I was failing in life. I thought my life was falling apart. This confusion, this disorientation crept on me. I didn't wake up one morning confused. It developed slowly over months and then years. And all I had was questions. And at the time, my wife wanted to help and she tried, but she couldn't. She wanted to know how she could help me, but I didn't even know how to help myself, and I couldn't tell her how to help me. And so, 4, 5 years into it, my marriage ended. My life was falling apart, and I still didn't have answers to those basic questions about who I was, what do I want to do next, what are my values, what are my standards. I was confused, and everything was falling apart. Here is what I didn't know back then. I didn't know that all of this was normal. I didn't know that this was a part of male development. It's a normal part of male development. So if you went through something like this when you were 40 to 45, or even before that, or after that, or if you're going through something like this right now, you may think that there is something uniquely and fundamentally wrong with you. But there is nothing wrong with you. This is a normal part of male development. Here is what's happening. I want to show you the stages of male development according to Alison Armstrong's framework in her book Keys to the Kingdom. These are 5 stages. I'm going to focus on 4 of them that are the essential stages that all men go through. And I'm going to focus on the midlife stages, especially on the stage that she calls the tunnel, because this explains the crisis that we go through. Only it's not a crisis, it's something entirely different. So what was really happening with me between 40 and 45? Alison Armstrong spent over 40 years studying men's psychology and behavior and teaching women how to approach their men in the way that men have to be approached according to the stages, the unique stages they go through. And women don't go through these stages, only we men do. And so I want to go over these 4 main stages really quickly. The first stage is the page. This stage lasts from birth to puberty. In this stage, boys are seeking adventure and they idolize the next stage, which is the knights. The knight stage lasts from puberty through the late 20s and even early 30s, and it's characterized by adventure, challenges, discovery, fun. Knights are living in the present moment. The next stage is prince. This is the midlife stage, from late 20s or early 30s for about 10 to 12 years. This is the building phase. You're building your kingdom. In other words, you're securing your life, you're defining yourself, you're making space for yourself in society. This stage is intensely focused on career and success. The next stage is the tunnel stage, and this is the stage I want to focus on a little bit more, but later in the video. That's the transition stage, and it can last from 6 months to 3 years or even more. This is where everything gets questioned: identity, values, accomplishments. And here's the key. This stage cannot be solved, it cannot be forced, because the very thing you need to solve problems, your sense of self, that's what's in question in this stage. But once we pass this stage, we enter the king stage, and this is the stage after the tunnel. You're a finished man in this stage, and your sense of self is complete and it's certain and you're grounded. So let's focus on the tunnel stage. This stage is not about external problems. It's about your identity being profoundly in question. Armstrong describes it perfectly. She says, everything you previously considered true, important, or valuable is involuntarily questioned. Your accomplishments, your standards, the things you built your life around, everything is questioned in this stage. And this is torturous for men because we're problem solvers. But everything we knew with which we could solve problems is now into question, and that's our identity. That's our rules for making decisions in life. All of this is into question. And it feels like we're standing on quicksand. It feels incredibly disorienting. So why does this happen? Where does that tunnel stage come from? During the Prince years, these 10, 12 years, while we're focused on securing our place in the world, building our kingdom, we don't realize it, but we focus on accommodating others. We focus on gaining respect, approval, affection, opportunities. Why? Because we need to excel in our lives. We need to build our foundation. And so we focus on the needs of others. Who are these others? Well, our parents, our partner, our colleagues, our boss, society as a whole. And we don't realize it, but we focus on the needs of all of these people around us that we build our life around. But eventually we realize what's happening, and it's not a sudden realization in the sense of mental, overt, conscious realization, but we start to feel that we haven't been in alignment with ourselves all our lives, and it really literally makes us sick to our stomachs. And so that is when the tunnel stage begins. We need to shift, we need to change, we need to completely rebuild our sense of self and what we think is important in life and what we value in life, so that we can start being in alignment with ourselves and not contorting to the needs of others. This is the tunnel stage. But here's the hard part. The tunnel is a one-man journey. And the reason for that is because we have to distance ourselves from everybody around us. Because remember, we were focused on accommodating everybody and their needs in the first part of life. And so we built an identity that's not truly authentic to who we really are deep on the inside. So now we have to distance ourselves from everybody so that we can rebuild ourselves, so that we can form a new sense of self that is authentic to us. And in doing so, that scares others, and those around us, especially our partners, but parents, friends, feel insecure because they sense that something is happening and they don't want to lose us. They don't want to lose who we were, but we really have to distance ourselves, and there is no other way around that. We have to go in the tunnel alone so that we can rebuild ourselves to who we truly are. And that's when our partners are trying to help us, but they're trying to help the past version of us, the version that they know, and they don't know who we are becoming. And that is why it's not working oftentimes. And that is why my marriage fell apart. And going through this requires tremendous courage, because we refuse to betray ourselves again. We refuse to be somebody else. And in that, we risk losing love, affection, even income. So let me tell you what 5 years in the tunnel were like for me. As I mentioned, these questions, this disorientation didn't start all of a sudden. It crept on me. But all these questions, who am I? What was I doing with my life? What do I want to do now? What do I really want? What are my values? What are my standards? What are my preferences? What is valuable for me in life? What is my purpose? What is really meaningful? What am I doing here? All of these questions were coming to me, but the more questions I had, the more questions even showed up, and I didn't have the answers. And I was living in constant shame at the time. Here I was in my early 40s, and my life was a mess. I couldn't figure out my life. And at that time, most men should have their life figured out, and mine wasn't. My partner at the time, she tried to help. She wanted me to tell her how to help me, but I couldn't because I didn't even know that myself. And 4 years into it, at 44, my marriage ended. My life was literally falling apart. Nothing on the inside was solid. On the outside, everything was falling apart as well. And everything I had built my identity around was in question. The people, the things I was doing so far, the things I wanted to do next, all of this was in question. And I didn't know it at the time, but all of this was normal because it's a normal part of men's development. If you went through something similar between 40 and 45, before that or even after that, here's what I want you to understand. You weren't broken, and your life was not falling apart. You were going through a normal development as a man. And everything you question, your purpose, your values, your accomplishments, all of this was not a failure. It was a part of this transition, because your identity at the time was built partially around accommodating others and their needs. And so you completely had to rebuild your identity from the ground up, from within. And so the tunnel, all of these questions, the not knowing, the confusion, the disorientation, all of this was required. You couldn't skip any of this, and you couldn't accelerate it. And it lasted as long as it needed to last. And if at the time people around you were angry or confused themselves, if relationships ended, if you made decisions that seemed strange at the time, that wasn't because you were selfish. That was because you refused to betray yourself again. So let me ask you, did you go through something similar between 40 and 45? Or are you going through it right now? Let me know in the comments below. I read all the comments. By the way, I have a free small WhatsApp community called Deeper Prime. We're about 60 of us, and we're completely embedded into Western life. But from this perspective, we're exploring questions like, what is consciousness? What is mind? What is the meaning of life? What is purpose? What is existence? And so if you're into exploring questions like this and not into surface level spirituality and guru stuff, you're more than welcome to join us. The link is in the description below. And also, I release a new video like this every Sunday. So if you want to go deeper, subscribe. So what was happening with me between 40 and 45? A predictable stage in men's development called the tunnel. Not a midlife crisis, but an identity crisis, because I was shifting from an identity built partially around accommodating others around me to a self-defined identity. And it wasn't a breakdown, it was evolution. This is what I wanted to share with you today.